Hello and welcome back to Talking Europe. Europe is the fastest warming continent in the world. That's according to a report by the World Meteorological Organization and the EU's Copernicus climate change service. Last summer was Europe's hottest on record, with thousands of excess deaths being linked to heat waves. The extremely dry conditions are still having major implications for agriculture and the supply of water. But authorities across the EU are learning from the various crises, and they've updated their plans to fight one of the most immediate risks this summer, wildfires. In this episode, we'll take a look at those plans and ponder what other climate-related disasters EU countries should be anticipating and which areas they might work more closely together. I'd like to welcome my two MEPs, Malin Björk, who is from Sweden, from the Left group here in the Parliament, and she sits on the Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
I'd also like to welcome Irène Tolleré, a French MEP from the Renew group, and she's on the Committee for Regional Development and a substitute on the Agriculture and Rural Development Committee. Welcome to you as well, Irène
Thank
Tolleré.
you very much.
I'd like to start with you first, Malin Björk. So Sweden, of course, was very badly hit in 2018 by the forest fires. You had 25,000 hectares that burnt.
Yeah.
How do you feel about preparations in Sweden this year if something like that happens again?
Well, I think we have very heightened alert levels at this moment in parts of the country. During periods, we've had to stop all the forestry work machines because they can give rise to little sparks that can start fires. People are not allowed to make barbecues, things that we in Sweden, in the northern countries, I think we were not used to that level of alert.
And you've been saying similar things about in France, how people have to take responsibility for the small things, not using matches, not having barbecues. So does this effort start with us as just ordinary citizens, basically?
Yes, because 90% of the fires that break through start with a man doing something, but this person does not know that this small thing will have a result as a big fire and devastation of nature. So it's very important, like the Japanese do, that we learn in school or through a special day dedicated to that there is a climate change, and that this climate change, we have to adapt somehow our way of being. And instead of doing a barbecue, we can have gazpacho, vitello tonata, and enjoy a very good time in the south of France.
But also on the level of law, Irène Tolleré, there's also been some new rules, haven't there? Yes. So you get fined in your region of France for having a barbecue.
Yeah,
so
you cannot smoke in forest anymore. It looks so basic, but we had to take a law to do that. And but having people aware of the consequences. Last year there was a fire near the place I live. It was a car that was not up to date with going to the garage. The car went on fire and was parked inside the park tree forest. So if you have a car that starts burning, leave it on the road. Do not park it inside a pine tree forest. So explain to people.
Common sense, yeah. Malin Björk, when you look at this mutualization or sharing of resources, I should say, in Europe, this pre-positioning of firefighters, the water bombers that are now being deployed in different European countries, do you think that we're reaching a good level of European solidarity now on this whole question?
Yes, I think it's good that we have those resources and we are developing them. But frankly speaking, I don't think that is the key part of the solution here. I would say Europe has much more tools and much more responsibility when it comes to prevention and putting in place legal frameworks that can halt, build resilience, and prevent wildfires. So that must be our focus, because if we think that we limit Europe to being there with the at the emergency end of things, instead of actually doing where we have a responsibility and tools as legislators to work on climate laws, on nature restoration laws, on instruments that this House should be promoting.
I want to come back to that
Yeah.
point. I'd like you to expand on that in a minute.
Yeah.
But just firstly, Irene Tolleré, just your thoughts on all these measures that are being taken across the EU. What do you make of that?
I think it's very important. Once again, without Europe, we would not have been able to relaunch a production of water bomber planes.
Yes.
And we needed those because when you have a big fire, water bombing planes are the only way that we have to try to restrict the fire. On the other hand, I think that we need to exchange because some countries in the south have maybe a longer history with living with the risk of fires and explain we do this like that. And nature restoration law is a perfect example. We need to deliver on this law, but we need at the same time that when there is a fire risk, there is no dead wood next to houses that can make a big fire start.
So it's reclaiming land as a kind of buffer zone, in a sense.
It's already done in France. Huh?
Yeah.
It's called obligation légale de débroussaillement, and everybody does it because nobody wants to burn
a legal
his house.
obligation to
Yes.
push away
To take away.
dry twigs and
To
things
take
like
away
that.
all the. I mean, you have done, I'm sure, a fire in your chimney. Your fire,
I
when
don't
you
have a
do
chimney.
when you do a fire in your chimney, you need to have small wood.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you take the small wood out, then the fires they don't start as
Yeah,
quickly,
okay.
and so you prevent having a big fire that develops.
Let's come back to the unused tools on prevention that you mentioned, Malin Bjork, and maybe we could elaborate a bit more on this nature restoration law. What is it, and why it's being politically blocked at the moment as well at the EU level, isn't it?
Well, I think, you look at the reasons for wildfire and other disasters also that we face. There is the climate change, so higher temperatures, less rain and water, so more drought. And we also have a loss of biodiversity and, natural forests, etc. And loss of wetlands, etc. And all these things contribute to higher risks of different disasters, but notably also wildfires. And it's not and this European Union and citizens see that we are legislators of cross-country and, things that don't stop at national borders. We can make a difference. And many of us came to this parliament and said, we will try to do our most to make a difference. And we have worked on the climate law, on the carbon market. We have worked on a carbon tax, border tax, etc. We have important instruments in place. But now, when we're trying to push this last piece of legislation on biodiversity, nature restoration law it's called, the right wing says we're not going to have it anymore. They're trying to stop one of the key pieces. And I think that's, it's like shooting ourselves in the foot.
They're saying it's because setting aside land which could be used for food production doesn't make sense in a war.
Yeah, but those are, what do you call that? Those are just like, I would say, excuses for not wanting to take the responsibility that we have to do here. And if we don't address that, as Madame Tolleré was saying, it's about land use, it's about how we restore and make sure that we are resilient to this.
So is it a problem of not applying the existing legal tools, or do there need to be new laws, new tools, or just a question of better applying what already exists?
I think that, first of all, we voted the Green Deal, we voted the Farm to Fork strategy. There are piles of legislative texts that are finished, but some are still on the table and some are soon to come. I think that we absolutely need to deliver on those. But to deliver on those, we need to listen to all the parts to make sure that there is a vote that embarks all the countries and all the European citizens.
But we are a nation of forest in Sweden and Finland also. But if we want that to be sustainable, and we want sustainable forestry, then we have to accept that we have to do something about certain things. And I think that and it's the same with food production and farming. We have to be, we have to look ourselves in the eyes and say, well, maybe we have to transition and do things differently and better in order to build resilience for the future. And I think we're not really daring to do that. And in the left, we will continue to insist on that. And we will continue to insist that the transition is just, more equal and more just than it is today.
And you sense that there is political pressure to put a pause on green transition or environmental regulations, given that political leaders in Europe want to focus on reindustrialization of Europe.
But that's, yes, of course, there are leaders and there are the right-wing political parties, EPP group in this parliament, they're saying, they're trying to stop it. And I will say, from the left, we are also interested in reindustrialization. But Europe's competitiveness should build on green reindustrialization, job creating, but through being leading in industries that pollute less. And we can do that, but with the wrong legal frameworks, we don't have a chance.
Irene Tolleré, I should have mentioned earlier, you're actually a winemaker yourself as well as a politician. So what do you take away from your winemaking life when we talk about these issues? I mean, how does it inform your legislative sort of thinking?
Basically, it's not my winemaking past, it's more my mayor of a very tiny village that is in the middle of a pine. I live in a pine tree forest, so and we had a very big fire in 2010. So it's more that knowledge of the rural truth that can be somewhat, somewhere a bit far from what we have in the Brussels bubble. And I think that it's very important that the European policies, they deliver on the big goal, but in a way that is also acceptable on the tiny village. And the subject of fire is also, the figures speak for themselves. Last year, we had 830,000 hectares of forest that burnt in Europe, which is roughly the size of the forest that we criticize Bolsonaro for deforesting. So the subject of having an efficient fire policy, climate catastrophes policy in Europe is a major one, and it's good for the environment because a big fire, you have no biodiversity left at all.
And the CO2 from a fire is enormous also.
We'll have to end it there. Thank you so much to both of my guests, Marleen Bjork and Irene Tolleré, and that is all for this edition of Talking Europe. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.